Imagine paying $30 for this premium thick-cut filet mignon. You take it home, you cook it to this perfect medium rare, and then later you find out you basically just ate a literal jigsaw puzzle of cheap meat scraps.
Yeah, held together by an industrial enzyme made out of animal blood.
Right, it's just wild.
Yeah.
So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are completely decoding the engineered illusion of the modern supermarket meat aisle.
And it really is an illusion.
It is. And our mission here is to kind of tear away that bright packaging, look past the clever marketing, and help you understand exactly what is happening to the protein on your plate. We want you to know who controls it and how you can actually protect your health and your wallet.
Yeah, because the transparency you think you have when you're shopping, it's just not there.
Exactly. And we have a massive stack of sources for this deep dive. We're pulling from investigative YouTube journalism that exposed retail meat scams, this sprawling Consumer Reports study on beef safety, government records from an active DOJ antitrust probe.
Don't forget the whistleblower accounts out of Brazil.
Oh, yeah. Those are wild. Plus a PETA investigation into food additives and a very recent CBS report on heavy metals in protein powders.
It's a phenomenal stack of materials.
Yeah.
And what it really reveals is that the industry has spent decades figuring out how to hack our visual cues. Like we see a bright red steak and think it's fresh and safe.
Right, which brings me to the physical steak you pick up at the store. Because looking at the investigative reporting, there's a label on certain brands. I mean, Walmart's Great Value brand is one example that literally says enhanced with solution.
Enhanced.
Which sounds great, right? Like a premium upgrade. But then you read the fine print, and enhanced actually means it's been injected with up to 15% salt water and sodium phosphate.
And the mechanism behind that injection process is just purely financial. I mean, meat is sold by the pound. So if processors can inject salt water into the muscle fibers, they artificially inflate the weight.
So they're increasing their profit margin?
Yeah, exactly. By up to 15%.
But wait, I'm taking that steak home and throwing it in a hot cast iron pan. The water doesn't survive the cooking process, right?
It cooks right off.
Yeah.
So if you buy a $20 steak that's been enhanced, you're literally watching $4.60 evaporate into thin air.
Oh.
Yeah, you end up with a $15.40 steak, but you paid $20.
Okay, that's annoying enough, getting scammed on water weight. But you mentioned sodium phosphate. What is that actually doing in there?
Well, sodium phosphate acts as an emulsifier. It's actually the exact same chemical used in industrial manufacturing for heavy-duty detergents.
Wait, like laundry detergent?
Yeah, because it binds to dirt and water perfectly. In a piece of meat, it acts as a trapping agent. It binds the injected water to the muscle proteins, so the meat doesn't just leak all that extra weight out into the styrofoam tray before you buy it.
Okay, I mean, chemically that makes sense, but the reporting highlighted a 2024 study on the human impact of eating this stuff, and it was pretty shocking. The data showed that older adults consuming high levels of sodium phosphate saw a 34% faster decline in kidney function. 34%.
Right, because the kidneys have to filter out all that excess phosphorus.
Yeah.
When you flood your system with an industrial additive like that, it puts this massive filtering strain on them.
And it causes other issues too, right?
Yeah, over time, that excess phosphorus can actually pull calcium out of your bones. That leads to vascular calcification, which is basically hardening of the arteries. So, consumers are paying a premium per pound to unknowingly accelerate organ damage.
Which makes that corporate strategy we found in the Safeway internal emails so chilling. They literally called it the senior citizen color scam.
That was a tough read.
They were discussing using carbon monoxide gas in their meat packaging, like the lethal stuff from car exhaust.
Well, to understand why, you kind of have to look at the chemistry of the meat. The protein that makes meat red is called myoglobin. When myoglobin gets exposed to oxygen, it turns bright cherry red. But naturally, over a few days, it oxidizes and turns brown, which is just a natural indicator of age.
Right, you see brown meat, you know it's old.
Exactly. But carbon monoxide binds to myoglobin with incredibly high affinity. It basically locks the protein into this permanent state called carboxymyoglobin.
So it freezes the color. The meat could be, weeks old and deteriorating, but it still looks like it was butchered that morning.
Precisely. And those internal Safeway documents noted that they specifically use this to target older shoppers.
Because older shoppers judge freshness by color.
Yeah, the 50-plus demographic has spent decades doing that. The executives literally called them high-value, low-resistance consumers. They calculated that this ingrained brand trust makes an older shopper worth like $847 more annually.
That is just weaponizing chemistry against the consumer. It's awful.
Yeah.
But if pumping meat full of water and gassing it is the chemical side, let's talk about the physical manipulation, because the sources get into blade tenderization, and that blew my mind.
Oh, blade tenderization is a massive issue. It's a mechanical process. So if you pick up a Costco Kirkland signature steak, or really cuts from a lot of major retailers, they've often been run through this machine.
And it punches holes in it, right?
Yeah. Hundreds of tiny needles. Sometimes up to 960 individual needle strikes into the flesh.
And the goal is just to take a cheap, tough cut of meat and sever the fibers so it feels like an expensive cut when you chew it.
Right, but the biological cost is huge. Normally, a solid piece of muscle is completely sterile on the inside. Any bacteria, like E. coli, is just sitting on the surface.
Which means when I sear it in a pan, the surface bacteria just dies instantly.
Exactly. But the moment you punch 1,000 needles into that steak, you're acting as a transportation system. You take whatever is living on the exterior and plunge it deep into the center.
So if I order that mechanically tenderized steak, medium rare,
The center never gets hot enough to kill the bacteria they just shoved inside.
that's terrifying.
The USDA actually knows this is a massive risk. That's why they mandate that blade tenderized meat has to be cooked to an internal temperature of 160 degrees.
Wait, 160? That's totally well done. Nobody wants a well-done steak.
Right. But the failure here is how it's communicated. The warning labels on these packages are usually microscopically small. And the data shows that in about 40% of cases at places like Kroger and Safeway, the mandatory labels are just missing entirely.
40%. Wow. Well, I feel like we have to talk about transglutaminase now. Because if needles are bad, meat glue is just on another level.
This is from the PETA investigation, right?
Yeah. Transglutaminase is an enzyme. It's heavily used by companies like Tyson. Biochemically, it forms covalent bonds between proteins. Kind of like how your blood platelets form a scab over a cut. It creates a biological mesh.
Okay.
Processors use it to take cheap $4 a pound scrap trimmings, coat them in this enzyme, roll them in plastic wrap, and just let them bind together into a solid block. And then they slice that block into those perfect little circles and sell them as premium $30 filet mignons.
Exactly.
That's the jigsaw puzzle meat I was talking about in the intro. The illusion is so perfect, you'd never know it was scraps from like dozens of different animals.
And the PETA investigation looked into where this enzyme actually comes from. The major manufacturer is a company called Ajinomoto, and they produce it using animal blood plasma.
Oh.
Yeah. And investigators found that Ajinomoto actually tests the safety of these additives by injecting them into mice and then snapping their necks.
God, setting aside the cruelty of that for a second, just the scale of this is insane. The sources said there are 8 million pounds of meat sold in the U.S. right now using this glue.
8 million.
Yeah.
And that spirals right back into the contamination thing we just talked about. The Consumer Report study showed ground beef and reconstructed beef products are massive vehicles for foodborne illness.
Right. They said ground beef alone causes 46% of E. coli 0157 cases.
Exactly. Facilities that use blade tenderization and meat glue have a 340% higher rate of cross-contamination, simply because they're constantly mixing genetic material and surface bacteria from hundreds of animals into single products.
Okay, but hold on. If these practices, the carbon monoxide, the meat glue, the water weight, if they're everywhere, how is nobody undercutting them with actual clean meat? Is the market just completely cornered?
It is arguably one of the most consolidated markets in the modern economy.
Right.
It's completely dominated by the big four meat packers.
Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and National Beef.
Right. And together, those four control 85% of the entire U.S. meat processing industry.
85%. That's a straight-up monopoly.
Which is exactly why the Department of Justice currently has an active antitrust probe investigating them for alleged price fixing. If four executives can basically sit in a room and decide what beef costs everywhere, the potential for manipulation is endless.
And you see this blowing up politically, too. Looking at the Fox Business reporting, it's wild how divided it is. And for you listening, we're not taking a side here. We're just reporting what the sources say.
Right, it's a very clear split.
Yeah. On one side, you have the Agriculture Secretary saying cattle herds are at their lowest level since the 1950s, and he blames leftist anti-cattle activists for waging a regulatory war on ranching.
And then on the other side, you have a White House trade advisor arguing that inflation is entirely driven by corporate monopoly power. He specifically pointed the finger at the Brazilian company JBS and their massive lobbying efforts to stifle competition.
It's just a massive blame game.
Yeah.
But when 4 companies own the whole pipeline, the only way we ever find out what's really happening is if someone inside breaks rank. Which brings us to the Brazilian whistleblower,
Daniel Gouveia Teixeira. His accounts are deeply, deeply unsettling.
Yeah, he was a government health inspector, right?
He was. And he blew the whistle on this massive processing company called Petching Agro-Industrial. He documented that they were putting out products containing up to 85% mechanically separated meat, or MSM.
Okay, for you listening, if you don't know what mechanically separated meat is, just think of a paste. They take the carcass after all the prime cuts are gone and push the remaining bones, skin, nerves, and connective tissue through a high-pressure sieve to make this slurry.
And the legal limit for MSM in these products is 60%. Petching was pushing it to 85%. But the much more dangerous thing Teixeira exposed was a massive bribery ring.
Right.
They were bribing government inspectors to allow them to package and sell literally rotting meat that was heavily tainted with salmonella.
And because the industry is so globalized, a scandal in Brazil isn't just a Brazilian problem. That meat ends up on plates everywhere, like the European Union hormone scandal from our stack.
Yeah, that perfectly illustrates how vulnerable the global supply chains are. A massive shipment of banned Brazilian beef slipped right past the EU's control systems through Dutch ports. And it was tainted with Ostradiol 17.
Which sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. What is Ostradiol 17 and why did the EU ban it?
It's a really potent synthetic estrogen. Ranchers use it as a growth promoter to alter the animal's metabolism so they gain weight super fast.
Right. More weight, more money.
Exactly. But the EU banned it completely because scientific reviews link hormone residues in the meat to potential carcinogenic effects and severe endocrine disruption in humans.
Especially developmental issues in children, right?
Yes, exactly.
So this banned synthetic hormone just breezes past international borders because these multinational conglomerates move so much volume that it's impossible to police.
And they're incredibly good at masking how big they are.
Oh, absolutely. I read the Karen Chris Farm blog from our sources, and they did this deep dive into a brand called Wild Fork Foods.
Wild Fork is such a fascinating case study in marketing illusion.
It really is, because it sounds like a boutique local butcher shop. You know, you picture a guy in an apron hand-cutting steaks at a local farm. They even use the marketing phrase, slow-fed beef.
Which means nothing.
I looked it up. It has no agricultural definition. It's completely made-up marketing term to make you feel like you're buying artisanal meat. But the reality, Wild Fork Foods is just a subsidiary of JBS.
The largest meat processing corporation on the planet.
Exactly. So consumers are actively trying to escape corporate meat packers by seeking out these small-sounding brands, and they're unknowingly funneling money straight back to the monopoly.
Which leads us perfectly into the absolute labyrinth of grocery store labeling. Because even when you try to be an educated consumer, the regulatory framework is literally designed to mislead you.
The product of USA label makes my blood boil. I always assumed that meant the cow was born, raised, and butchered in America.
That's what they want you to assume. But the legal reality is a massive loophole. The U.S. imports roughly 3.2 billion pounds of beef a year from places like Brazil, Uruguay, and Australia. Under current regulations, a shipping container of foreign beef can arrive at a U.S. facility, be unpacked, processed, and repackaged in just 24 hours.
Yeah.
And because that final processing step happened on U.S. soil, they legally slap a product of USA sticker on it.
That is just absurd. You think you're supporting a family rancher in Kansas, but you're buying South American beef that took a layover in an American warehouse?
Yeah.
But what about health labels? Like, people pay double for grass-fed beef because they want the omega-3 benefits.
Well, biologically, a true grass-fed cow does have a completely different nutritional profile. When they eat grass, their stomach has a neutral pH, which grows bacteria that produce high levels of omega-3 fatty acids.
The good stuff.
Right. A true grass-fed steak has the vitamin content and omega-3 profile of 3 conventional steaks. But when you move a cow to a feedlot and pump it full of corn and grain, the stomach becomes highly acidic.
And that kills the good bacteria.
It completely kills the omega-3 producing bacteria and replaces them with bacteria that produce inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids.
But the labeling scam here is that a product can be called grass-fed, even if the cow spent the end of its life in a feedlot eating grain. Right.
Exactly. Our sources show that 89% of products at major retailers with a grass-fed label are actually grain-finished.
89%?
Yeah. meaning they ate grass early on, which almost all cattle do, but were then moved to an industrial feedlot to fatten up before slaughter. That completely destroys the omega-3 profile. So you're paying premium grass-fed prices for conventional inflammatory feedlot nutrition.
God. Okay, well, we can't talk about hidden realities without bringing up pink slime.
Technically known as lean, finely textured beef, or LFTB.
Right, LFTB. It's basically taking the lowest grade beef trimmings, spinning them in a centrifuge to separate the fat, and then taking that remaining paste and treating it with ammonium gas to kill off the heavy bacterial load.
Right.
But here's my question. If I buy ground beef that has this paste in it, ammonium gas is not on the ingredient list. How on earth is that legal?
It's all about the regulatory distinction between an ingredient and a processing aid.
Okay.
By law, an ingredient has a functional, lasting effect in the final product. But a processing aid is just a substance used during manufacturing to achieve an effect like ammonia-killing bacteria. And supposedly, it dissipates or gets removed before packaging.
So the USDA lets them argue that the ammonia did its job and just vanished, so they don't have to disclose it.
Precisely. It legally vanishes from the label, and the consumer is completely blind to the chemical bath their food just took.
Okay, so what labels actually mean anything? If product of USA is a loophole, grass-fed is mostly grain-finished, and natural is just a marketing word, how do you navigate this?
You really have to ignore the marketing terms entirely. Like you said, natural has zero legal teeth. The Consumer Reports study highly recommends looking for stringent third-party verifications.
Like what?
Labels like Animal Welfare Approved or JP Step 5 Plus. Those aren't marketing slogans. They are certifications with strict, independent audits that legally prohibit feedlots, daily antibiotics, and synthetic hormones.
Okay, well, I can hear people listening to this right now thinking, you know, the meat glue, the ammonium gas, the salt water, the monopolies, they're thinking, I'm done, I'm taking beef off the menu, and I'm just going to switch to plant-based protein powders.
Which seems like a logical escape route. But the CBS News and Consumer Reports investigation into protein powders is a very harsh reality check.
Yeah, this piece really threw me. They tested 23 of the most popular protein powders and shakes on the market.
And the results were not good.
No. More than 2/3 of the products tested contained unsafe levels of heavy metals.
Specifically, they exceeded the recognized safe daily limit of 0.5 micrograms of lead.
And the data showed that plant-based powders are actually the worst offenders. They had 9 times the amount of lead found in dairy or whey proteins.
Wow.
Yeah, and twice as much lead as the beef-based protein products. The report specifically flagged massive brands like Huel's Black Edition and Naked Nutrition's Vegan Mass Gainer as products to actively avoid because of high levels of lead, cadmium, and inorganic arsenic.
It's crazy. But the mechanism behind this is just rooted in agricultural reality. Heavy metals like lead are naturally in the Earth's crust, but decades of industrial pollution, pesticides, and contaminated runoff have highly elevated the lead levels in the soil.
And plants act like sponges, right?
Exactly. Plant roots absorb these heavy metals as they grow. An animal might filter some of those metals out through its biological processes before producing milk or beef, but a plant just stores it.
Right.
So when you harvest thousands of pounds of peas or soy, dry them out, and blowserize them into a hyper-concentrated powder, you are hyper-concentrating all the heavy metals those plants absorbed.
It is genuinely like a tragic game of dietary whack-a-mole. You try to dodge the meat glue and carbon monoxide by making a healthy switch to vegan protein, and then you accidentally serve yourself a heavy metal cocktail in the supplement aisle.
It really emphasizes a super uncomfortable truth, which is that no sector of the industrial food system is immune to these hidden risks. It all comes back to how far removed our food has become from its origin and how heavily processed it is.
Which really brings us to the core of this whole deep dive. For you listening, navigating this engineered illusion means you have to treat the supermarket with skepticism. Your choices are incredibly powerful, but this consolidated system relies entirely on you not knowing how the mechanisms work.
Right.
But now you do. So check the fine print to avoid enhanced with solution. Recognize that terms like natural and product of USA are mostly legal fictions. Seek out true third-party verifications like GAP Step 5 plus APL, or honestly, just build a relationship with a trusted local butcher where you can see the whole cuts. That's how you protect your wallet and your health.
You know, all of this obfuscation we've talked about today, the hidden meat glue, the carbon monoxide, the loopholes for ammonia, it raises a massive question about the future of food.
Yeah.
Because we are right on the precipice of lab-grown, cultivated meats becoming a mainstream commercial reality.
All right, like meat grown from a cellular level in a bioreactor.
Exactly. Cultivated meat is grown in a completely sterile laboratory environment. It requires zero antibiotics because there's no slaughterhouse bacteria. It requires zero blade tenderization. And the entire cellular process is, by regulatory necessity, completely transparent.
Wow.
It forces us to ask this really philosophical question. In the next decade, will the utter transparency of a steak grown in a steel laboratory vat actually feel more natural and more safe to future generations than the heavily disguised, chemically injected, industrially manipulated farm animals we're eating today?
Man, that is a wild thought to leave on. The idea that to escape the artificial engineering of the farm, we might actually have to embrace the total transparency of the lab. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the meat aisle. Keep reading those labels, and we will catch you next time.